There are stories from the years before the Second World War that rarely make it into official histories. They are not about generals, nor about battles, but about the farmers, homesteaders, and ordinary families who knew the land better than most of us ever will. Among these stories lies a secret ingredient that shaped the way people revived tired fields and kept their soil alive without chemical fertilizers. It was simple, natural, and shockingly effective, but it had one strange condition. On its own, it did very little. But when mixed with virgin soil, untouched and alive with native microbes, it created humus faster than any compost heap ever could. This was the ingredient that quietly sustained countless families on the edge of survival, yet after the war, it slipped into obscurity. To understand it, we have to return to a world before factory fertilizers, before bags of synthetic nitrogen lined store shelves, back to when soil survival was the difference between hunger and abundance. In the years before World War II, especially in rural Europe and North America, farmers didn't have the luxury of manufactured soil boosters. What they had was animal manure, compost, ash and ingenuity. If a harvest spoiled, if food went mouldy, nothing was wasted. It was tested, repurposed and often returned to the earth. One of the most remarkable practices that emerged was the use of spoiled grain infusions, liquids made when sacks of barley, wheat or rye began to ferment in damp storage. Farmers discovered that this rotting liquid, which they strained and poured into fields, could awaken the soil in ways ordinary compost could not. It produced fields that smelled richer, held moisture longer, and drew earthworms to the surface in droves. Yet, oddly enough, the liquid did little when poured onto dead or lifeless ground. Its magic depended entirely on mixing with virgin soil, land that still held its microbial diversity intact. The spoiled grain infusion, often called rotten barley tea in some traditions, was not fertilizer in the traditional sense. It was not about adding raw nutrients like nitrogen or phosphorus. Instead, it acted as a biological catalyst. When grain ferments, the starches break down into sugars, releasing compounds that attract lactobacillus, yeasts and fungal spores. Left long enough, mold threads weave through the soaked grain, creating something that closely resembles the fungal networks beneath a healthy forest floor. This liquid became a microbial starter, filled with life but lacking the structure to persist on its own. That is why it needed virgin soil. Virgin soil provided the native microbes, the fungal highways, and the natural predators that could take this starter and amplify it. Together they accelerated decomposition, built humus, and transformed poor fields into thriving ground in record time. Without that living partnership, the liquid would simply seep away unnoticed. Farm diaries from the 1930s and 1940s speak of experiments that, at the time, sounded almost superstitious. Farmers noticed that when a bucket of spoiled grain water was poured into a compost pile, the heap warmed within days, even in cool weather. They observed that fields treated with the infusion after ploughing grew stronger cover crops, while untreated fields lagged behind. During wartime, when fertilizer production was redirected to military industry, these quiet practices became survival tools. Families who understood them could keep their gardens fertile even under rationing. The ingredient never carried an official name because it was not part of state programs. It was folk knowledge, passed down in barns and fields. And once chemical fertilizers flooded the market after the war, it was dismissed as unnecessary and quietly forgotten. Modern soil science, it gives us a clearer lens. Rotten barley tea actually worked because it provided an immediate burst of microbial fuel. The acids, sugars and enzymes from fermentation acted as food for soil fungi. When poured into soil already rich in microbial communities, this fuel really jump-started activity. Fungi multiplied rapidly, weaving hyphae that broke down cellulose and lignin in plant matter. Earthworms followed, drawn to the thriving microbial banquet. Their castings added structure and long-term fertility, locking carbon into humus. But in sterilized or compacted ground, where microbial life was absent, the liquid just fizzled. There were no native microbes to amplify it, no fungi to latch onto its sugars, and no worms to follow the trail. In other words, this ingredient was never meant to work alone. It was always a partnership with living soil. For gardeners today, rediscovering this ingredient means more than just copying the past. It means understanding that soil is not just dirt, it is a living system. Spoiled grain infusions, whether from barley, wheat, or even rice, can still be made today. They cost almost nothing and require little effort beyond soaking grains in water until fermentation takes hold. But their effectiveness, well, it depends on pairing them with soil that has life. Adding them to beds already layered with compost, leaves, or mulch creates the perfect conditions for humus to form rapidly. This is the hidden wisdom of pre-World War II farmers. Fertility was never about pouring more in, but about sparking what was already there. So why did such an effective practice vanish from mainstream use? The answer lies in convenience and industry. After the war, synthetic fertilizers promised instant results. Farmers no longer had to wait for soil biology to do the work. They could buy nitrogen in a bag and see rapid plant growth. For a world desperate to rebuild, this was irresistible. Generations later, we are rediscovering the cost-depleted soils, vanishing worms, and fragile ecosystems. You know, the forgotten pre-World War II soil ingredient wasn't left behind because it failed, but rather because it called for patience and a belief in soil as a living community. In an age so hungry for quick fixes, that kind of knowledge just seemed, well, outdated. But today it feels almost prophetic. When we look back at these old practices, we're not just collecting curiosities. We're actually reviving tools that can restore resilience to our soil and independence to our gardens. The farmers of the past understood something we're only now relearning. Healthy soil isn't built by chemicals, but by life itself. Rotten barley, tea, and other spoiled grain starters show us that even what seems wasted can become the very foundation of fertility when it's paired with living earth. Perhaps the most valuable lesson here is that soil improvement simply can't be separated from history. Each forgotten tradition carries the experience of those who managed to survive without modern convenience, and in that, well, there's both wisdom and a warning. The forgotten pre-World War II soil ingredient that only works when mixed with virgin soil is so much more than just a quirky story from the past. It's a reminder that nature already designed systems to create humus and fertility, if only we learn how to work alongside them. For the farmers who depended on it, this practice was a matter of survival. For us today, it could be the key to rebuilding soils damaged by decades of neglect. If this little exploration into forgotten soil traditions has fascinated you, please do subscribe to In the Beginning and share this video with fellow history enthusiasts. Together, we can uncover even more of these hidden stories that show just how the ingenuity of the past still carries solutions for our future.